Can we strike the right balance between public safety and protecting individual liberties when it comes to bail reform? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to The Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on The Brian Nichols Show, and thank you for joining us on, of course, another fun-filled episode. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle Studios here in Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by our friends over at AMP America. If you're looking for all the news you need to know without the corporate media bias or fluff, head to ampamerica.com. We have articles, news pieces, and opinion pieces and more over there. I think the opinion pieces are pretty darn good, if I do say so myself, namely because I write a few of them. But hey, go ahead, check it out. Let me know what your thoughts are over at ampamerica.com. Also, the Brian Nichols Show is brought to you by our amazing studio sponsor, and that is, yes, the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. Now, I've been using Cardio Miracle for just about a year, and I got to tell you, folks, the Cardio Miracle difference, 1000% real. My blood pressure was always high, and I didn't know why. I went to the gym. I worked out 6 days a week. I had lost 180 pounds. I'm like, I don't know what more I can do here. And then my doctor was like, oh, you got this wonderful thing called genetics. And I was like, oh, that thing. So thanks, mom and dad. Family history of high blood pressure. And I thought I was SOL until I had John Hewlett here on the show, CEO of Cardio Miracle. And he starts talking about this new tool he's bringing to the tool belt for folks when they're trying to take control of their health. A secret ingredient, nitric oxide. I'm like, this Cardio Miracle thing sounds too good to be true. So I gave it a shot. I said, we'll go ahead and test this bad boy out. 2 months. That's all it took. 2 months. And my blood pressure went down from 140s to over 90 to about 120 over 80 consistently. My doctor was floored. I was floored. Family was floored. So, with that being said, I'm sold. I'm on board. I'm on the Cardio Miracle train. And folks, I'm here not to try and just sell you Cardio Miracle. I'm here because I see the difference for myself, and I want you to see the difference as well. And by the way, there's hundreds of you out there in the Brian Nichols Show audience who are already on board. 2 thumbs up to you folks. And by the way, there's thousands of you out there, tens of thousands, frankly, who are already experiencing the Cardio Miracle difference for yourselves. So if you want to have the lower blood pressure, heck, a better night's sleep, better pump at the gym, just an overall better ticker, all you got to do is head down below into the show notes or video description if you're watching us on YouTube, and just click that link. It's going to bring you to cardiomiracle.com. You're going to get 15% off your order just by clicking that link, or if you use code TBNS at checkout. Now, folks, I hear you. Brian, this sounds like you said too good to be true. I guarantee it's not, but don't take my word for it. And heck, don't even take the other folks' word for it. Just trust the fact that you don't have anything to lose, because there's a 100% money back guarantee. So head to the show notes, click the link. Folks, Cardio Miracle is the best heart health supplement in the world, bar none. Start today. I guarantee your heart will thank you. All right, folks, let's move forward into a conversation that, candidly, I know a lot of folks just don't get. They understand the idea of bail reform. They understand the idea of bail bonds. But in terms of how it impacts the actual political discourse of the day, there usually is that deer in the headlights look. So I said, you know what? Let's go ahead and have somebody who maybe knows a thing or two about bails and bail reform and bail bonds. How about the executive director of the American Bail Coalition joining us here on the show today from the American Bail Coalition, Jeff Clayton. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show. How you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on, Brian.
Great to have you here, Jeff. Thanks for hopping on the show, and thanks for obviously helping us learn and understand all things bail reform, bail bonds, all that and more. But before we go into the deep dive, right, into the meat and potatoes, let's have some appetizer. Let's do us a favor here at the Brian Nichols Show audience. Introduce yourself to the audience, and also American Bail Coalition. What do you guys do, and why is it so important in the world of bail reform?
Well, I'm Jeff Clayton. I'm the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, which is a trade association of insurance companies who underwrite bail bonds throughout the country. Why is it important? Because the fundamental question of when the government can arrest you and the process of you getting out or not is sort of critical, and the most fundamental question that we ask, and the most fundamental thing that the government does, which is take its own citizens into custody. So very important.
Very important indeed. And with that, Jeff, lots of questions. So let's just start out here, almost bail bonds 101. For the audience who, and by the way, we have a lot of folks in the audience who they're under the age of 25. I was just going through some demographics and stuff here with my marketing team, and we're sitting down and we're like, what's going on? We're looking at the numbers, and 18 to 25, there's been an influx of folks trying to understand what the heck is happening. Now, Jeff, I might go on my soapbox and say, well, probably because they're not learning too much in those government education centers that we call public schools, or those indoctrination centers we call colleges or universities. But that's a different podcast for a different day. But I'm seeing them right now. They're coming to the audience and they're wanting to understand what's actually happening, how things work, how things frankly don't work. And bail bonds is definitely an area in the government schooling system we really don't talk about. So before we go into some of the objections I hear from folks or some of the questions I'm sure you get asked, just what is the bail bond process? How does it work? Why is it important? And help those, yes, particularly younger folks in our audience better understand how we got to where we are today with the bail bond process.
First thing for the younger generation, and let me cut through the aioli here, you might say, is don't trust the government. You are trusting the government with this criminal process of taking you into custody and getting it right. And remember, there are a lot of mistakes are made along the way in terms of the decision to bring the prosecution, the decision to arrest you in the first place. And it takes a long time in this criminal justice system to get to the answer. And so do not trust the government. That is what bail is all about, is your ability to get away from the government pending trial. Most of what bail reform is about is either a political discourse that has nothing to do with reality, or the reality, which is we're going to offer you all kinds of alternatives to having to post bail. We'll put you on supervision. We'll put you on an ankle monitor. We'll do all this stuff because you're innocent. Well, that doesn't add up. And that's what all this debate is about underneath it all at the policy level, is how much are we going to trample your liberties or avoid the ultimate choice, which is some people should get out for free. And we just have to fess up to and face the fact that people are going to get out for free and post bonds and commit more crimes. And how much are we going to tolerate that in society? That's what the debate is really about. And that's kind of an abstract concept to get to. Bottom line, don't trust the government, get away from the government until you get convicted. That's the bottom line right there.
Don't trust the government. I think that's an evergreen statement here on the program, heck, just in general. But let's take this a little bit further here, Jeff, beyond just not trusting the government, because I think the audience hears that, right? Especially because we are a more liberty-leaning show. But how do we ensure the presumption of innocence, right? When we're making sure that folks who are being arrested, that we're, yes, addressing public safety concerns, but we're also keeping that presumption of innocence maintained. Is there a yin and a yang here when it comes to bail bonds and bail reform?
Well, we are demeaning the institution of money bail to the point where it's resulting in more people getting detained. Bottom line is, bail is about securing your ability or your appearance in court. That is the original purpose. We've strayed from that by trying to handicap, like the Kentucky Derby, whether you're going to commit a new crime, and assigning higher bails based on that. That's illegal and multi-generational legal problem we're trying to solve. But aside from that, that is the original point of bail, is that you're supposed to appear. And judges make those decisions on what type of security we think, just like if you're loaning a car or you get a Toro vehicle, we're going to take a credit card deposit and all this sort of thing. It's the same kind of concept, but with an added layer, which is that 90% of the time, it's a third party that's making that guarantee. And in our case, you have bail bondsmen involved, which also have arrest powers across the United States to return people when they don't come to court. That's when the Dog the Bounty Hunter type and all these bail recovery shows come into play.
Gotcha. Okay. So this is a question. Let's go into some of the objections I get, right? So I do research. I do some curation from the audience. And believe it or not, we do have some, I would dare say, bleeding heart libertarians, folks in the audience who they want the best for folks. And that's very admirable. But I think there's also maybe they want the best for folks, but also a forgetting that we live in the real world, if that makes sense. So one of the questions I get asked, and I'll give them the benefit of the doubt here and ask you the question, Jeff. So how can we prevent the bail system from disproportionately impacting low-income individuals and perpetuating a quote-unquote cycle of poverty in incarceration? That's one of the main objections I hear from that bleeding heart libertarian audience. What say you?
Well, the first thing is, don't sell solutions that are going to make it worse. And that's what we've seen in the federal system that took, 1 out of 4 people being detained and now 3 out of 4 people being detained in the name of poverty, using the same arguments we're using in every state capital today, which is people are poor and they should get out. Let's focus on that, and let's not sell solutions like more incarceration, more ankle monitors, more paying, more diversion, more all this other stuff. And we're just lengthening trials. Let's get to the point. And the reality is, I think you're right. I think when we do that and we start examining who has to post bail and why, we start figuring out that there's certain people that shouldn't. And in Colorado, my home state, we in the ACLU looked at some of the people that were in and we're like, okay, this is a problem. And we actually passed legislation to say we're not allowing bail in these crimes because there just wasn't enough justification for it. And if it's a contempt of court where the guy is taking his pants off and running around the court, the court has to do a bail, then that's fine. They can do it under the general power of contempt, not under a misdemeanor sleeping on a park bench charge. So that's what we think. Stop selling those solutions. Let's focus in on the reality of who's posting bail and not, and focus on that. Because I think there are solutions to be found and there are poor people to be protected. And the other big thing is they don't get a hearing. In this country, the due process, this crucial decision that I talk about, when I was an attorney and I started, they said, call Joe Beanie the bail bondsman. He handles it. And that was the extent of it. And we're talking about the crucial custodial decisions affecting people's lives. And that's just reality, unfortunately. We need to put more focus on this particular decision.
So you said earlier, don't trust the government. Yep, on board. But looking at the system that we have now, what's the appropriate level of government involvement in the bail system? So how can we balance this very delicate yin and yang of public safety, individual liberty, with having the government being this arbiter of, arbiter of morality, but legally speaking, right? They're the ones who are enforcing the codified laws. So while we don't trust the government, I guess what's the role of government in those processes, despite the fact that we don't trust them when looking at how they're going to deal with this public safety versus individual liberty?
Well, it's case by case. So it's the arguments of the counsel in the case, and it is arbitrary for that reason, I think, to a certain extent. And people are always going to say it is. You commit this crime, the bail should be this. And that's how it starts in California. And then, we go from there, and then maybe that's unfair to the poor. So, I think we have to rely on the judges to do that, unfortunately. And that's not really that good of an answer, but I think that's just the way that it is. Why don't we trust the government? Because it's all the other alternatives, right? The original purpose of bail is to ensure appearance. It's not to prevent you from committing a future crime. And that, I don't know how we get around that. I think that is a fundamental problem that both sides of the aisle are not talking about, that should be talking about, that we have been talking about, and that we are going to be talking about, which is a repeal of the Federal Bail Reform Act of 1984, to put focus on the fact that predicting future dangerousness like a stupid Tom Cruise movie is our law. People believe in that, and that's not what the framers intended. And I think if we did that, we would protect the presumption of innocence better than the system we have now, because it would be based on whether they're going to show up or not, and whether they're going to answer for the charges, not whether you're going to commit a future crime that we haven't indicted you on yet.
Somewhere Tom Cruise is weeping, by the way. Now let's talk about this.
Did like Top Gun, so hey.
Okay, we'll take the win where we can get the win. So let's talk about this, Jeff, because you look at the way that bail bonds was originally built to like what it was actually intended to do, get people to actually go to court, versus what you mentioned, right? What it's being used today, avoid worst case, future crimes and such. But how did we get here, right? How did we get to a point where the bond system has been so perverted from the intended role of it to what we see today? And I guess in that mentality, right? How do we rein it back in without having any unintended consequences, much like the unintended consequences, I'm sure, led to where we are today?
Well, I'm writing a law review article about this, since it's very difficult to put the genie back in the bottle. That's the answer. And it really, I think the crossroads is 1987 and a decision by Chief Justice Rehnquist allowing this detention based on future dangerousness. Probably the best dissent that Justice Thurgood Marshall ever wrote, in my opinion, saying this is not the system we have in America. So to convince people that people shouldn't be sitting in jail based on their future dangerousness is a hard road, and a very bipartisan, difficult one to hoe right now, because people are into Willie Horton mode right now that, hey, we're hard on crime, we're soft on crime. And that's really not what the pretrial system is about. Well, the measure of hard on crime is how quickly do we get these people and convict them when we arrest them? What is our strike rate? You look at Los Angeles County, for example. They arrest people, they only convict them 70% of the time of the people they arrest. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. That should be the measure of the criminal justice system, not pretrial. We should need to worry about future crimes because we're too busy convicting them of these crimes now, which we don't do. Look at South Carolina. Average time to dispo felony case, 2 years. bail's kind of important because we'll see you 2 years later. But on the other hand, how does that deter somebody who's out? It doesn't. It says, we'll worry about that later. We'll worry about that 2, seasons of pumpkin pies later. Like, this is ridiculous. It doesn't deter. So that's the real answer. It's not bail. It's the other parts. But, convincing people that all these parts of the criminal justice system work together is hard to do in a political context. And this, having been in the political world, it's very difficult in an election cycle and the amount of time that politicians touch your issue, which is very small.
So you mentioned all the different areas working together. My day job, I'm in the world of technology, and I'm instantly seeing where are we missing technology right now in this process? Because I'm not trying to make the whole profession of bail bonds sound archaic. We're going back hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of a process here where, we go on our computers and we can be greeted by AI and automation and all this wild and crazy technology, Jeff. So in that spirit, are we missing out on some of the newer technologies to help address the reason we have bail bond in the first place? Can we start to maybe change the way we talk about bail bonds by leveraging the technologies that are actually available nowadays?
Habeas corpus, which means your right to appeal before the court. But what it really means is, in the bail context, is quick release. You cannot bail people out nationally with this right now. And that is the difference, right? Bail is your fundamental constitutional right, and we need it now. We have waiting rights for guns, but the right to bail is not dangerous, right? We need it now. We don't need a background check for the third parties that are posting bail. We don't need a background check for the bail bondsmen. They're already licensed. We don't need a license for the insurance companies. They're already licensed. The instantaneous nature of bail and the fact that it relieves you of all other state burdens pending trial is something that nobody has leveraged. And it is the beauty of bail. The other thing that people haven't leveraged is the fact that bail bondsmen take custody of people. If we want to help people and improve people, we have a ready pipeline of people that are there that we could take custody of and make them do something. It is a whole area that hasn't been explored, is how could we divert people doing this. The fact that we have custody of them is a whole nother area that people on the sort of the left side of this say, well, we hate bail. It's like, we'll take custody of your people, get them away from the government, and let's get them on the right path and get actual real pretrial services, meaning drug treatment and all the sort of thing that people need, employment services, to get them going on the right path, at least the people that we think we can help. And I think that's a big population that we're just ignoring right now.
So Jeff, you hinted at this, and I want to maybe take this a step further. So how much are you seeing our criminal justice system and I'm just going to encapsulate public health here, but mental health specifically, how much are we seeing those two worlds really starting to intercross with each other, right? And with that, how many of those issues from a mental health standpoint are, instead of being addressed through a health perspective, being addressed through the criminal justice system? And I guess, what are the implications there?
Well, I hate to sound like Nancy Reagan, but kids should not do drugs, because that is what is going on, and that's okay. But what is also going on is that we don't have a residential custodial place for people to make the transition off drugs. And I had a friend who went through this, and he went to Southern California, and he was there for 3 months, and he was great, and it costs a fortune, and he's solved. He went through this major process. But that's not what everybody can do. They still got to work their jobs. They're going to lose their house. They got their wife. They got their kids. They got their child support. They got this and that. We just don't have that capacity as a country. Every single jail administrator or sheriff in this country will say that the jail is the de facto, detox facility in this country. And I know that some urban centers, if you get a DUI, they put you in. But by and large, if somebody's violent and they, that's where they're going to go, is jail. And so, yes, we need to solve that. And then the other thing is just treatment. People go, by the time they get to the criminal justice system, it's too late at that point, right? They've already gone across a place that we don't want them to go, into this zone where we don't know if we're going to be able to get them back. And that's the unfortunate part. We need to start much sooner with that. But really, it comes down to drugs. That's the number one thing we see, wrecking people's lives. And I think it really is this fentanyl, and not as only is it killing 80,000 Americans a year, it's doing major damage along the way to people. So if you want to think about anything in the criminal justice system of why people are in there, that's a biggie. And then, as you said, mental health, but that's an obvious one. And, lack of capacity for that's been something people have been talking about since, for 40 years, since we got rid of sanitariums and stuff.
So we talked about big picture bail bond stuff. Now let's go to bail bonds and such in the news. And we're going to go down to the state of Georgia, where Governor Kemp just went and passed a law, or signed a law rather, increasing the number of bail restricted offenses. Now, your friends over at the ACLU, Jeff, they're not too happy. They said this is a cruel, costly, and counterproductive measure. Now, I love myself a good alliteration, but something's telling me that maybe they're trying to make people feel a certain way instead of actually addressing what this bill that Governor Kemp signed into law actually did.
Yeah, and then they said it was going to ruin the entire future of Georgia or something like that in the same paragraph. It's not that big of a bill, folks, okay? It is an important bill. And what the bail restricted offense thing means is no automatic free bails. No scheduling a policy to say this guy gets a free bail. And why do we do that? Because states like Texas and other states say, you got to see a judge first, or we're going to relieve the bail burden, particularly in some of these very high level cases. And that's what Georgia did a couple of years ago. And frankly, the ACLU didn't sue at all at that point to say these high level crimes, you had to go see a judge first. And guess what? When you see a judge can do a dollar bail, you know, and they don't. But the point is, it's an automatic way to keep people from falling through the cracks that are dangerous. And it tells the judges that the legislature thinks these are important. These people should probably have to secure their release because they're facing a major sentence. They've committed a major crime, and we want to make sure that they show up for it. That's all it does. And so the ACLU can whine and cry all day long. It didn't, like other states, set mandatory bails, which we've seen in statute, 50,000 for some bails, and it still allows an indigency test at the end of the day, right? The judge says, hey, buddy, you got to do some security. Well, that could still be 5 cents because he's poor, right? That could still be the amount in the canteen money. You know, and the best bail reform case that the ACLU filed all the time was up in Massachusetts, in Boston. You can see the red-faced judge saying, motion denied. He may say he can't afford his bail, but I checked his canteen account and he has more money in there than the bail was allowed. So let's not get into that. So, there's always a lot going on bail.
So, Jeff, we've gone through big picture. We've gone through some stuff in the news. And now, unfortunately, we're at the part where we got to start wrapping things up. So with that, I would love it if you could give us, your final thoughts for today's episode. Namely, as we're looking at bail bonds, bail reform, there's a lot of narratives out there, right? So what would you recommend to folks, both the young members of our audience, the older members of our audience, who are looking at bail reform, looking at bail bonds as a topic in the news, and how can they navigate the fluff, the emotional narratives with what actually is happening boots on the ground?
Well, stay away from extremist labels on our topic. End cash bail, increase cash bail, this type of stuff. That's not what you want to do. You want to go to ambailcoalition.org and dial in on this issue and learn what it really means. Because what it really means is an old system of civil rights that's very difficult to understand, but makes sense when you think about it. And you're going to see, the second thing is you're going to see a lot of noise in the election on our issue. The crime and homelessness in California, but crime in general is going to be a top 3 issue going into this campaign.
All right, Jeff Clayton, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, talking all things bail bonds, bail reform. And folks, if you got some value, as much as I did here on today's episode, I'm going to ask you to please go ahead and give it a share. When you do, please tag yours truly on Facebook, x.com, Instagram at B Nichols Liberty. Jeff, where can folks go ahead, support you, support American Bail Coalition, and obviously stay up to date on all that's happening in the world when it comes to bail reform and bail bonds?
Yep. Check us out on X, ambailcoalition.org. You got me amped up. Thanks for having me on. The music, everything was great. Appreciate it.
Love it. Amp America's getting people amped up here. I love to hear that. So we'll make sure we let our friends there over at Amp America know. No, thank you, Jeff. We really appreciate having you on the show. And folks, with that being said, you know where to go ahead and find the show because you're listening to us somewhere out there. So wherever you caught us today, you can catch us on a different platform. So if you listen to us on the podcast versions of the show, no worries. We have the video versions of the show. So head over to YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, wherever it is you consume your video content. Hit that subscribe button, hit that little notification bell, and head down below in the comments. Let us know your thoughts. If you're younger, is this the first time you've actually had a real actual understanding of what bail bonds are and how bail reform works? If you're older, is this the first time you've heard a different approach when it comes to bail bonds or bail reform? On either side, we want to hear your thoughts. Continue that conversation down below. And for the podcast version of the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever it is you consume your podcasts, just hit download all unplayed episodes after you subscribe to the program. Reason being, we have over 840 episodes here of the program. Actually, we've had a few conversations in shows from yesteryear with folks talking about bail bonds. So go back into the archives, listen to how the conversation has changed, how it's grown. Heck, listen to how my perspectives have changed and grown over the past few years. I guarantee after 2020, you're going to see a little bit of those perspectives change quite a bit. So go ahead, check that out. We want to hear your thoughts as well. Email me, Brian at briannicholsshow.com. And one last plug, folks. Please, we love you, and we want you to be able to continue to enjoy amazing content that we produce here with amazing guests like Jeff. So we need your help, and that is by asking you to please support the folks who support us, and that is our amazing sponsors. So Cardio Miracle, we have our new friends over at the Liberty Emporium. They have their Michael Scott from The Office, his Michael Scott 2024. He's running for office, apparently. It's his 40-day plan, 40-day shirt. Go ahead, check that out over at our homepage, briannicholsshow.com. We have awesome new sponsors like our Liquid Freedom Energy Tea, as well as our friends over at the Wellness Company. Use code TBNS at checkout at all of our sponsors for some type of discount applied at your purchase. 15% off here, $5 off here, whatever it is. It should hopefully bring a smile to your face. And if you did join us today and you got some value beyond giving it a share, please give us a 5-star rating and review. Let us know if you were left today feeling educated, enlightened, and informed. That's all we have for you. That being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show from the American Bail Coalition for Jeff Clayton. We'll see you next time.